There's a mistake. Moonlight, you guys won Best Picture.
You like me right now. You like me.
Ever since I was a little kid, I wanted this.
Mom, I just want an Oscar.
I'm Connor Wolf, and welcome back to another episode of the Ultimate Oscar Showdown. And this week we're going to be looking at a new set of category, the Best Lead Actress category. We've gone back now to the 2010s decade, and we're gonna go decade by decade, ranking the Best Actress winners of the Oscars from each year of this decade. Starting off with the 2010s this week, I'm going to go all the way to the 1970s. Then when we're done the 1970s, we're going to go into the Best Supporting Actor category and break down those winners and rank those winners. It's been a lot of fun so far. Really excited to talk about the Best Actress winners because a lot of them don't overlap with, say, Best Picture, and they're sort of these unique winners, and definitely some unique movies within them and sort of unique storylines and whatnot that we'll all break down over these next few weeks. But if you're new to the series, what I do every single week is rank Oscar winners. This week, of course, like I mentioned, the Best Lead Actress category, starting in every single year of the 2010s, and rank them from S tier all the way to D tier, S being the highest, D being the lowest. And as always, it is greatly appreciated if you comment below and let me know your own personal rankings. I love to read them. I love to hear your guys' comments. That's why I make these videos, to build a great film community. And if you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Those things help as well. But jumping into things now, starting off with the 2010 winner, that's going to go to Natalie Portman for Black Swan. And Natalie Portman is a personal favorite actress of mine, even though I think her sort of post-Oscar win career hasn't had as much hits as maybe I'd like to. Despite that, she's always trying something new, she's always doing something different, she's always taking risks and chances and trying to do something that's out of her comfort zone, which I've always applauded. And during this period, she was really at her peak, similarly with someone like Darren Aronofsky, who was coming off The Wrestler and then did this. And it's a movie where I think she'll be well remembered for it. And I do think she'll be a well remembered actress at the grand scheme of things. And I do think Darren Aronofsky, even though his 2023 reputation is a little bit depressed, his appreciation during this time period was strong, and I do think will be looked upon, highly in the years to come. So I do think it's a movie that has stood the test of time, even, we're only 15-ish years away from the movie. And what Portman is so great at in this movie is committing herself to the subjective approach to the movie. If you've seen the movie, it has a lot of sort of medium close-ups, tight close-ups. There's a constant handheld camera, always moving with our protagonist. And that really works well to create what feels like a very subjective viewpoint of Natalie Portman's character, almost a correlation to, say, a first-person storytelling technique you'd read in, say, a book. The way you do that on film is to really move the camera with the character, keep these tight close-ups. You feel like you're in her world, you feel like you're in her sort of mind. It's a very subjective film in that way. Now, Natalie Portman knows this, and what she's able to do through her acting is emphasize that. So the subjective way to sort of indicate subjectivity within film oftentimes is keeping the camera with the character, moving with them, showing POV shots, what the movie often does, keeping those close-ups as well. But that's what you can do on a filmmaking side. But the actor itself has to create a lot of that feeling as well, because the movie is so subjective, is so centered on her character. She can't be talking all the time. Dialogue of course helps, but sometimes there's smaller things that you can do combined with those camera techniques to create subjectivity. And I think Natalie Portman does a great job here using that. Oftentimes she's darting her eyes, looking all over the place. So understand that she's sort of anxious and nervous. She walks really fast. She does a great job at keeping her head very controlled and contained, oftentimes looking over her shoulder. When we have these type close-ups, your movement as an actor is very drastic because we're so close and tied up to you. One little slight movement can feel like a massive change on the screen. So she's smart at keeping her head relatively still, but still sort of having this sort of nervous, jittery energy to show that anxiousness or show that jealousy that she's feeling. And then oftentimes, like I said, looking past the camera, darting her eyes, always looking behind her in many instances, creates that sense of anxiousness and unsureness and what's happening to me, kind of a horror feeling that the film is so great at portraying. Portman's able to communicate that to us. And for a movie that is so well done, that's so central to her performance, in which so many scenes are clearly communicated through just her eyes, just her performance without dialogue. It's a true testament to how great of a performer she is in this film. So for me, it's one of my favorite performances of this decade. So I'm going to put it into the S tier. Then the 2011 winner, Meryl Streep, the Iron Lady. Maybe in hindsight, a little bit of an unnecessary win, because on one hand you go, well, she's Meryl Streep, she's one of the greatest actors of all time. She deserves to be in that 3-time acting winner, rarefied air with some of the all-time greats, Daniel Day-Lewis, Katharine Hepburn. But then you also go, well, this movie's a little bit more forgotten. The film itself isn't super terrific, and she probably should have been rewarded for other movies. I don't know if this is necessarily a top 3 best performance of her career. That being said, I think Meryl Streep is definitely solid and class in this film. I think she does a great job at portraying some of more masculine qualities of Margaret Thatcher as a character. I think Meryl Streep looks quite a bit like her in the film, but just that sense of strictness and uptightness and rigidness, I think in terms of her body language and how she holds her shoulders and her sort of staccato speech patterns, she really emphasizes some of those qualities that Thatcher had, that at least portrayed herself as a sort of dominant political leader when she was in office. But what I think the film also does, to the film's benefit, is also try to understand Margaret Thatcher as a person, not just as an icon, not just as a political figure, but as someone who's maybe unsure of some of her messages, of trying to do something that is great, trying to make an improvement, even though the results maybe didn't end up the way she wanted or had envisioned. So a little bit more empathy to that character, which I think some people will naturally push back against because they have their own personal political beliefs of the time. But just of that natural character piece, I thought it was well done with the story, and Streep's able to bring a lot of that humanity. So she's able to capture some of the more strong, idealistic, political speakings and speeches of Thatcher, but also give her a human core as well. It's a little bit unfortunate the film is a little bit traditional and generic and doesn't give Meryl Streep a whole lot to always work with, but what Meryl Streep is given, she's able to execute very well. So for me, it will go into the B tier. Then Jennifer Lawrence for Silver Linings Playbook is the 2012 winner, and now over a decade since we had this, she was the sort of it girl of the time. She had been nominated in 2010 for Winter's Bone, but I think this win and this nominee even was a sort of big moment for her, because she was the sort of now sort of klutzy, relatable, quirky kind of a new girl in Hollywood. She was very young at this time, but sort of immediately launched her into a movie star status, and that's entirely because of her performance. Now, there's also helps that I think her real life persona was very charming and funny and quirky and nice to be around, but that stems from her performance in this movie, in which it was a serious box office success and helped make her a household name. And I think if you look at this movie as a dramatic Oscar type win, like you would see Daniel Day-Lewis in My Left Foot, you'd go, oh, this is not a great performance. But if you see this as the Meg Ryan in When Harry Met Sally performance, the birth of a movie star type of performance, then you understand a lot more and you go, wow, this is really terrific. I think she's immediately captures her persona, her movie star persona in this film, uses her charm and her sort of bluntness and her honesty, which is aligned with her character, with sort of undiagnosed mental illnesses. Because of that, she's very sort of blunt and direct. And then because of that, allows her to be more funny and charming, but also in a sort of smart exposition kind of way, deliver some of the exposition of the story in a sort of a naturalistic kind of a way as well, that's sort of true to the character. So I think in terms of establishing her persona as being sort of quirky and honest and not going to sort of bullshit you, and I think she really does a great job at communicating that, and very charming in this movie, very funny in this movie, has that sort of charisma of a great leading lady, a great movie star, and that's demonstrated in the film. So it's a movie star making performance, and for me it's a great movie star making performance in that, if you approach it and understand it from that viewpoint. So for me, it will go into the A tier. Then Cate Blanchett in Blue Jasmine, which is a weird movie just because people don't talk about it in the modern day sense, I think because it has the Woody Allen stench to it, but also, and because of that, and because the fact that she won an Oscar for this, people don't feel the need to overly celebrate it. That being said, I do think Cate Blanchett is a sort of Meryl Streep-esque actor where, and similar to Meryl Streep in many ways, her best performances aren't always the ones that she has the Oscar for. So when I think of Cate Blanchett, I think of Tar, I think of Carol. I don't necessarily always think of Blue Jasmine or say The Aviator. But speaking about the performance itself, Cate Blanchett is, of course, once again terrific in that. And I can understand why the Oscars ultimately did reward this performance, because there are scenes where she has this sort of existential dread, where she has this sort of meltdown. Essentially, if you don't know about this Ruth Madoff type character who has to move into her lower class sister's house in San Francisco, and her trying to go from this very rich, sophisticated lifestyle to being an everybody and everyman sort of person, in her kind of, you know, hatred and disillusionment with her identity and her sense of values, and her idea that, you know, this is a woman so obsessed with status and image. And I think Blanchett understands the sort of existential crisis that's actually facing her, and Woody Allen is also able to sort of understand that this is not a sort of high concept comedy of someone who's really rich now has to be middle class. It's really like, what if this person who was accustomed to this lifestyle now has to lose everything and become, you know, just a regular person and almost restart her life, and the embarrassment that comes with it, and that sense of sort of identity crisis that comes along with it, that also essentially in this movie her Jasmine Blanchett's character has to be drugged up on pills and alcohol just to sort of get through life, just to overcome that embarrassment of her life, of what she's become, of what she has to be subject to. And it's a testament to Blanchett and her performance that she's able to maintain that anxiousness throughout the film. Continually disgusted, continually sort of desperate just for any sort of sense of normalcy in her own life. But I also think the movie works really well because you have smart, dramatic situations that Woody Allen is able to write. But Blanchett, just the way she has this sort of sulken face, and sulks around in many scenes, or even just she'll look at something with just intense disgust. I mean, one look of Blanchett of disgust of her sister's boyfriend will do more than any incredibly, you know, smart written line that Woody Allen gives in the movie. And that's the stuff that she as a performer adds to the movie. It's a movie that has a little bit of a complicated reputation, but she is terrific in it, full stop. So for me, it's an A-tier performance. Then the 2014 winner, Julianne Moore, for Still Alice, which was preordained at the time as a sort of career achievement award. Still Alice had no other nominations. It was like, Julianne Moore, we like her, it's time for her to get an Oscar. And that was what it was at the beginning when it premiered at TIFF, and it stayed at the end, and she sort of just cruised to an Oscar in many ways. But I also think that this is not a traditional career Oscar type of a win, because most of the time those career Oscars, Scent of a Woman, things like that, you go, well, it's not their best performance. Well, Julianne Moore in Still Alice, I don't know if it's her best performance, but I definitely think it's one of her top 3. I think she is absolutely terrific in it. And rewatching this movie, I hadn't seen it for like 7 or 8 years now, and rewatching the movie in anticipation for this episode, I was really surprised at just how great she is in the movie. It's not just a career sort of achievement. I mean, it was positioned that at the time, but I do think the performance itself is deserving. You know, the fact that Moore, who plays this Columbia professor who has early onset dementia, and we see a sort of quick progression into that, she's able to do incredible sort of subtlety in the progression of the disease, of the condition, where she works very well in the beginning as the quick-witted wine mom who's very respected by her colleagues and even, you know, her children and her husband. And then also in the later parts where she has those Alzheimer's and she can't remember things, and there's certain instances of blankness that she's so able to commit to, but then also understand and communicate to us the pains of this disease, the burden that it has on the other members of her family, the embarrassment that she feels when she can't remember things, and just the fact that Moore is able to, you know, I don't think this movie was shot in sequence. That means she has to jump back and forth. The technical skill of being able to understand, okay, we're in scene 40 and then tomorrow we're in scene 14. So in scene 40, I have to be this much closer towards Alzheimer's, versus scene 14, I can't be as closer to Alzheimer's in that scene. So she has to constantly judge her level of blankness, her level of understanding, her level of trying to hide it, but is still communicating to us that she is hiding it in the scenes. And just the fact that you really feel for Alice and her plight is a testament to the sensitivity that Moore brings to the character and the honestness that she tries to portray and the empathy that she gives with that character. It really is remarkable. And I think, you know, it's an intimate and honest portrayal of degenerate memory loss, and it was really an emotional and impactful performance for me. So while it may have been positioned as a career, let's give Julianne Moore an Oscar type of performance, I don't want this movie to be forgotten to time just as that, because it really is truly a great performance on her part. So for me, it will go into the A tier. Then 2015 winner Brie Larson from Room, a performance where in my mind the win was the definition of an ingenue type of a win. Like Jennifer Lawrence in Silver Linings Playbook or Gwyneth Paltrow in Shakespeare in Love, every once in a while there's an actress that bursts onto the scene who's very young, who sort of is so great in this movie that people think of her like, oh my god, she's the next big movie star, we're going to put her in all the big things. You can see Alicia Vikander for The Danish Girl is a similar thing as well. Usually the younger actresses get rewarded earlier than the younger actors. You know, Timothée Chalamet doesn't have an Oscar. Austin Butler doesn't have an Oscar. They'll probably win one, but probably when they're in their 40s or 50s, versus the actresses usually get awarded a little bit younger. And it's been a little bit unfortunate post-Oscar career, I think, for Brie Larson. She's been really stuck into the franchise movies of Marvel and Fast and Furious, and then her sort of one big project aside from that was the Unicorn Stone, which was her directorial movie that she also starred in for Netflix, which didn't really go anywhere in terms of awards or general positive reputation. But regardless of her post-Oscar career, was this performance deserving of an Oscar? And for me, not really. It never really connected with me. You know, the first time I watched the movie, I thought it was pretty good, but I never totally understood the hype of her performance. And then rewatched it in anticipation of this video, and once again, wasn't able to totally connect to the emotional arc of the character. Just the fact that I think what's so necessary for the story is to believe into the maternal instincts of her character, and yet it feels like those maternal instincts are thrust upon the character due to the situation, more so than they're stemming from the character, which left me a little bit more conflicted and emotionally cold within the story. Now, I know a lot of people very much connect to the movie and think she's absolutely terrific in it, but for some reason for me, I was never able to totally emotionally connect with her character, and it's never been a performance that has totally wowed me. She's not bad in it, she does what she's asked to, and well in that regard, but for some reason, because the story never totally connected with me as a movie, I felt it hard to appreciate her performance. So for me, it will go into the C tier. Then the 2016 winner was Emma Stone for La La Land, which was another ingenue performance, and an ingenue performance I liked quite a bit. Now, she had already had big successes, you know, in Superbad and Zombieland and Easy A, but still, when she won in 2016, she was only 28, so still incredibly young, and still has a great career in front of her, and she's had, I think, a great post-Oscar career, and I do see her as a really exciting young actor under 35. And what I think she's so great at in this performance is sort of do both. In the series of acting winners, we often talked about sort of movie star performances, which is focused more on persona and charm and humor and just likability. And then there's sort of dramatic performances, which is how well you can transform into a character, how well you can sell emotional parts of scenes, how well you can feel for their character and the sympathies that you have for them and the empathy that you have for that character that the actor brings out of them. It has these two elements of dramatic quality, but then also movie star quality. And I think Emma Stone has both in this movie. On the movie star side, she has all those great meet-cute scenes with Ryan Gosling's character that work really well. And then on the emotional side, I think the fact that she does her own singing brings a sense of authenticity to the film, so that when we get that audition to the Fools Who Dream sequence, to me, you know, the tear ducts just open up completely. I find it incredibly emotional. And you understand sort of difficulties of her situation and of what she has to sacrifice to get this, and how that puts a strain on the relationship. So that we have this sort of relationship uncomfortabilities in the fights that works just as well as the meet cutes and the fun times, early days of the relationship. So a very deserving win in my opinion. Even if it's not the most transformative type of a role, it still is a really engaging, exciting, and emotional performance that has both movie star qualities of charmingness, of likability, of just glowingness almost, but also has the emotion to it as well. So for me, it will go into the S tier. Then the 2017 winner, Frances McDormand, for 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. This was a really interesting movie that I was excited to rewatch in anticipation for this episode, because I had seen it at TIFF, right at the beginning of its Oscar season, and then I had never seen it until the recent rewatch, a few days ago in preparation for this episode. And in the interim, we've seen the movie really get sort of taken apart, taken with all these sort of hot takes and these analysis of why the movies may be problematic and maybe shouldn't win, and sort of just was chewed through the internet and take cycle machine. So it was interesting to see, how my interpretation of the movie would be after hearing all those things, but still having some distance from the 2018, early 2018 Oscar news cycle versus when I saw it in September of 2017 at TIFF. And I think it brings a unique perspective to it, and does sort of add certain elements and brings certain points that I didn't always consider when I saw it the first time around. That being said, I still think a lot of people miss the point of the movie, which is that it's an angry movie. I think people don't like the movie because it's not necessarily clear in what it's trying to say. But I think it's in purposeful intention, that it is an angry movie, that it is a movie that's not necessarily directed at anything or anyone. It's just about a lot of characters who feel like maybe an everyday citizen, whether it be apathetic or rageful, to sort of a lack of change and lack of control over their own lives and the system that they live within. And I think McDormand is a perfect representation of that. I think the movie really works well, and her performance works better if you understand her sort of real life persona, the sort of I don't give an F, do what I want kind of a real life persona. I think works well in this movie because it's essentially an extension of a real life persona, except a little bit more heightened, a little bit more humorous at times. And when the movie works, when the performance really works and is at its best, is when she's very funny and poignant. But at times, I think the character does lack a sort of true North Star, that there is understandable frustrations that even I have, where you sort of understand, why is this person mad at what exactly is driving her. That lack of clarity, which I think is purposeful in the movie, still leaves you a little bit frustrated in terms of trying to understand the character and where they're coming from, and therefore I think hurts a little bit of the performance, because you don't McDormand isn't communicating always what those motives are. So I'm a little bit split on this one. I lean more good than bad, so it'll go into the B tier. Then the 2018 winner, Olivia Coleman, for The Favorite. A true shocker when it happened. I think everyone thought that Glenn Close, the 7-time nominated actress winner, would finally win legendary actor, except everyone forgot that The Wife hadn't really been seen by a lot of people and really wasn't liked by a lot of people. But The Favorite was a well-nominated movie and a well-liked movie, and Olivia Coleman it was a true breakout performance, even though she was older when the movie came out and had been in quite a lot of stuff in England and whatnot. This was a real big sort of announcement for a lot of American viewers of her, and they really liked her, and they really liked her in person, and then, surprise, she won. Now for me, it's interesting to see Olivia Coleman positioned as the lead, because this is really truly a three-hander. And when we're putting sort of them all in a bucket, Stone, Weiss, and Coleman's actually probably my least favorite of the three, pun intended. But that being said, there is still a remarkable, intensive amount of commitment that she has to the performance as Queen Anne, this brash and vulgar and very babyish kind of a woman at the center, who is always sulking, who is always sort of whining and complaining. But still you see the other sort of Stone and Weiss trying to vie for her affection. And I think the commitment she has to such an unusual and strange character is commendable, and also allows her to be quite often the sort of funniest part of the movie, and deliver lines with great comedic timing, which is very well, appreciated by myself. That being said, she is still, I think, the least developed as an overall character, and more used so as a comedic device within the movie, but a strong comedic device and an unusual comedic device at that. So for me, it will go into the B tier. And then to the 2019 winner, Renee Zellweger for Judy, a seemingly very accurate portrait of Judy Garland. And you knew she was going to win since the beginning of the Oscar season, because Judy Garland is a very well appreciated member within Oscar history. So getting a biopic of her, played by Renee Zellweger, an actress who lots of members of the Academy really well appreciate, it was sort of just a match made in heaven. Now, her performance, I think, is very solid, but oftentimes she doesn't have the movie to back up with that. The movie isn't always as strong as her performance, so because of that, we often get these sort of flashbacks that will seem like they're going somewhere and then often stop, or we'll get these modern day scenes that seem like they're building up momentum and we're going to lead to some emotional catharsis, and then they sort of divert its energy. So because of that, Renee doesn't always have the strongest material to actually demonstrate the tragedy of this real life story of Judy Garland, which limits, I think, sort of her emotional capability in terms of connecting with the audience. So there's some struggling that happens there as well. It's a well-observed performance, but ultimately I don't totally understand or connect with her journey or her motives. But it's not necessarily something I'd place upon Renee, and more so the lack of characterization within her character. But she does very well with what she does have to do, so there's respect given there. So it will go into the C tier. But that's it. Take a look at the list, the 2010s actress. Actress is an interesting category that we'll be talking about for the next coming weeks, because certain years, because there's not always lead actress focused films that are made, particularly when we get into the 70s and the 80s, we see a little bit more stretches. But I do think this will be one of the better decades because of how far we've come with making female-centric performances and movies with great and interesting characters, many of which I consider these to be. But that's about it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Comment below, let me know your thoughts and your rankings of the 2010s actor winners. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.